Hey y'all, this is Julie at Two Chicks Quilting in Ganado, Texas, and I'm here today for our tips and tricks with Two Chicks. And in addition, this is kind of a two-part video. In addition to our tips and tricks today, this really goes with our quilt along that we did on our bullseye quilt. So this is the bullseye quilt behind me, which we did a free sew along in our Friends of Two Chicks Quilting group. You can check out the video there. You can also check out our YouTube channel and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then all of the videos that we do here on Facebook eventually get loaded up into YouTube. It takes us a week or so because we have to do some stuff to the videos, but they will be on our YouTube channel. So the bullseye quilt, I wanted to add a different kind of border to it. So I wanted this really cool scrappy border. Plus, when you do the bullseye quilt, you end up with a lot of scraps because you're cutting out the back side of those circles. And so I ended up with a bunch of scraps. And so I thought, what better way to use them than in a scrappy border? So that's what I did. So if you made the bullseye quilt, or if you want to go make the bullseye quilt, you can check out the free tutorial and sew along with us. We do have this kit available, and that gives you this awesome background fabric is out of a batik, and then we have the wovens here for all of our circles. But this scrappy border was kind of just it's a really simple thing to do, and it uses a product that we love here in the shop. It's called scrap tape. I'm just going to show you two different sizes of it. There's also a bigger one for like string quilts to do squares out of, to do blocks. But this is the 2.5-inch scrap tape and then the 5-inch scrap tape. They come in 25-yard lengths, and what it is a water-soluble, super thin stabilizer. And you just build your scrappy border on this stabilizer and then sew it into your quilt. As you can see here, it's still in there, but when I quilt this and then wash it, it'll go away. So it just makes it super easy to piece a border. And I'm going to show you guys how to do it. So I am working with this is my third quilt that I made using one of the 5-inch scrap tape packages. I can still do a whole nother quilt on here, I feel, so because I've already done 3. So I feel like I can get 4 nice size throw quilts. The first one I did was actually a king size quilt. And then the other 2 were throw sizes. So you can for sure get 4, if not 5 throw size quilts out of it, out of a package. What I did on this one was I actually cut the 5-inch wide down to 2.5. And how I did that was I pull off of the roll how long I need. So I measure the side of the quilt I'm working with, and then I pull off that much plus about 1 inch extra and cut that off. Now this one here, I laid it down. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to waste it. And then I just took my ruler and measured 2.5 inches from the edge and cut it in half. So that, because I wanted to make the 2.5-inch wide border, but I didn't want to open up another scrap tape here in the shop. So if you have the 5-inch, this just shows you can get the 2.5 out of your 5-inch. So just so you know that. So anyway, I have my piece of scrap tape here. Now this is a short piece because this is a piece I had left over, but I just want to show you guys how to put together this border. Now what I did is I don't know if they can see the corners. I'll pull this one up. I started on the sides. So I wanted to start with my batik because I want these little blocks to seem like they're just floating throughout my border. So I had a bunch of these circle pieces left, and I cut these kind of in fourths. So I folded it once, and it just depends on the size of circle. You need to measure to make sure it's big enough. And then I cut it again. And then I had a piece like this. I'm going to start this on the end here of my scrap tape, and I want to be able to, you have to cover the entire piece of scrap tape So I'm going to go as far as I can to where all of that is covered. I want a good piece here at the end. Like I said, I cut mine about an inch bigger than what it needed to be, and I want to make sure I have at least a half an inch on each end in this blue that I can trim it up to be exactly the size I need it. And then I'm going to take a piece of my other colors that I had, and I'm going to see, is this one big enough? It is. I'm going to put right sides together. Now the batik, either there's not really a right or wrong side, and there's not a right or wrong side to this woven either. So I was able to do this pretty easy without thinking about what's right and wrong side. But just pay attention, and if you wonder, is this going to cover, you can kind of fold it over and see, is it going to cover this whole side? If not, you might need to scoot it over. But I feel pretty confident that's going to cover what I need it to cover. So I'm going to take it to my machine and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 of an inch seam. Does this have to be perfect? No, it doesn't. So if it's not quite a 1/4 of an inch, or if it's more like 1/2 inch, that's fine. Just know that that's going to take up the fabric that's going to cover your scrap tape. So this is what you've got. Now, depending on how much I have hanging over here, I do like to just take my scissors. I'm going to fold that scrap tape back so I don't accidentally cut it. And I'm going to trim that off. You can use your rotary cutter too. I am not, however, going to trim anything off the sides. I just want that one piece. Then I'm either going to, I like to use, don't touch your iron to that. It does kind of wrinkle it up. I'm going to carefully press this, not getting my iron on the scrap tape. You saw what happened. And then I'm going to take another piece of my blue, and I wanted that, wonky, scrappy look, so I kind of alternated which way these little stripes went. So if I look at this, maybe I want to go where the stripes are going to go the opposite direction. I want to be careful to cover that edge right there where that green goes around that, or the scrap tape starts showing right there at the edge of that green. So I am going to put this over, and I'm going to give it a little bit of an angle because I want to give it an interesting look. So I'm checking it just to make sure it's going to cover what I want it to cover. And I'm going to go stitch that along the side of that blue. So then we have that. I'm going to trim this off, pull that scrap tape back. And I just use my scissors because it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's just easier than, getting it to the cutting board with a ruler. Now I'm going to find another piece here, a different color, and do the same thing. This time I'm going to kind of make my angle go the other way. This makes scrappy borders so easy. And when I say scrappy borders, they don't have to be really scrappy. Piano key borders. So if you're, the last 2 quilts I made had one of them was all the pieces were 2.5 inches by 5 inches. So, but that's kind of hard to keep lined up and straight when you're sewing a king size width border together. So that's what I loved about the scrap tape, because it was so easy to keep that square. Also, when you're doing, the other one I did was tiny little 1 inch, different size pieces from 1 inch to 1.5 inches to, some of them were almost 2 inches wide, I think, but it was different variations of how wide they were, but they were all narrow. So that was really super hard if I didn't have it on that scrap tape. So I'm going to trim this off again, press, and then I'm going to go with another piece of my blue. So you just keep repeating this until you get everything on there. That piece isn't big enough. So let me go find one of my other circles. I'm going to cut this one in half, but it's one of the smaller pieces. So if I cut it in half again, it's not going to be wide enough. So I'm just going to use this half. Well, I need the blue stripe first. Come on, let me do the blue stripe first. Let's see which way I want to angle it. Making sure I'm covering all my pieces of scrap tape. And don't overthink it. Don't overthink it because it's not that hard. And I did forget to trim this a few times. That doesn't matter either. It'll be fine. So this is a good example to show you how that got a little crooked. So I can't go all the way down here to add a piece because I need to cover that scrap tape right there. So I'm going to go with my next piece of fabric here. Lay it on there. Stitch it. Trim. Now notice I've got more hanging over the edges, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to stitch this, press this, and then do another blue piece. Now I ran out of my circles on some of my colors, so I did have some just yardage left over, so I cut some rectangles. Now I just chopped this off with my scissors. I didn't even pay attention if it was square or not. It doesn't need to be. Don't stress out about it, just because if you want this really scrappy look, that does not matter at all. It is very forgiving, very forgiving. Now I'm going to lay this here. Now I am going to look at this and say, you know, I can probably trim this off about right here and be safe. Throw that back in my pile, and then I'm going to work with this piece here. Now you don't have to do it exactly the way I did it. You can cut your squares, you can cut your squares, say 3 inch, 2.5 inches by 3 inches, and that way you have a little bit late hanging over the edges, or you can cut them 3 inches, and then when you sew them on, they're going to be 2.5 inches. Anyway, you can do it however you want to do it. You don't have to be as scrappy and willy-nilly as I'm doing it. So I'm going to finish this. We're going to pretend this is my whole border. This is my last piece. I want to make sure I'm ending with that background fabric. So I am going to put the background fabric on here. Making sure I have that placed just right. And this border is ready to be trimmed and put on your quilt. So you press this last piece. I covered up every little piece of my scrap tape now. And it's very scrappy looking. But the next thing we want to do is we want to trim this up. I'm going to have to swap places with my ironing mat and I need to get this iron out of my way before I burn myself. Now I'm going to bring this to my cutting mat, and I want to be able to see that scrap tape. So turn it wrong side or face down so you can see the scrap tape. Take a long ruler, and you are going to line up. Now I make sure I square the ends of my scrap tape up when I cut it. So I cut with a ruler. so that I can line up that on my ruler. I can adjust it by making sure that everything is lined up here with the edge of my ruler. I am not cutting past the end of my scrap tape yet. I'm leaving that for now, and I'll explain why in just a minute. I'm going to trim this all the way off. There's a glare. I got to get where it's not glaring on this ruler. I can see it. Okay, so now I have my border all trimmed up. But notice I didn't trim the ends yet, because at this point I want to get a really good measurement on the length of border I need. So I want to go back and measure my quilt from the top to the bottom of where I need to put that border, and then measure my border, make sure it's the same length. So you have room to trim this off and square these ends up when you get that correct length. So let's say mine needed to be 13. Let's say mine needed to be 12.5 inches, because that just happens to be what this ruler is. So I'm going to square up one end to where I think it looks good. And then I'm going to go to the measure 12.5 inches. I'm just pretending this is what we're doing here. I'm lining it up good with my ruler. And then I'm going to go down here and trim off the other end to where it's the correct length. So you can use this around for sashings. You can do this in borders. You can use it for tons of different things. And like I said, it's very versatile, because you can do the 2.5. You can do all kinds of 2.5 inch pieces like this. The 5 inch you can use for, you can make 5 inch, or you can cut it down and do 2.5, or any increment below 5 inches really. So if you wanted a 4 inch outside border that's scrappy, you could do that. The good thing about this, if this is your outside border, it is stabilized. You're not going to worry about it stretching. I can pull and pull and pull on this. It is not going to stretch at all. So it's very stable. You can also use it, like I said, for sashing. The 13 inch wide comes in a smaller yardage. It doesn't come 25 yards to the package, but you could square that up and make blocks, make string blocks out of that. So that's how I did the border on this bullseye quilt. If you didn't get to tune in the video for the free sew along on the bullseye quilt, check out that in our Friends of Two Chicks Quilting group. You will find that video, as well as it will be up on our YouTube channel. If it's not there just yet, it will be in a couple of days. And then this is the second part. So to go back to the borders, what I did on the quilt is I cut 1.5 inches. So I did a little narrow border, and then I added my 2.5 inch scrappy border, so it finishes at 2 inches. And then I added a 4 inch outer border. So I cut that at 4 inches. So an extra yard would be plenty. You should have enough out of your extra fabric if you bought the kit to do the little inner border and your scrappy border. So that's all we have for you today, and I hope that this gives you something to think about, because ever since we got this scrap tape, I keep thinking of things I can do with it. So the more we think about we can do with it, the more we're going to share with you. So we'll see you guys later, and y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye.